For the past several days, I've been playing Assassin's Creed Shadows non-stop, and I've put over 50 hours into the game. I've got a lot to say about Shadows, and in this video, I'll be giving my impressions as well as if the game is worth your time. Before we begin, I wanted to thank Ubisoft Canada for providing me a free copy of the game for review and content creation purposes. So, let's start with the story. Now, this game has had a lot of controversy surrounding it leading up to this launch. So in this video, I'm not really going to focus on that. There are tons of channels already doing it, so it doesn't make sense for me to pile on that as well. I know people aren't happy with Yasuke being a samurai and his representation in this game, and how people feel that Ubisoft has twisted the history related to him and yada yada yada. Which, I understand if people are so interested in things being super historically accurate, but this is a video game, and that too a series that takes historical events and figures and makes what-if scenarios and stories around them. So it really doesn't bother me that Yasuke is here. These games have never really been historically accurate. Take Cesare Borgia from Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. He supposedly died when a bunch of knights killed him with a spear and left his body naked. Yet in Brotherhood, Ezio faces him alone and throws him off a castle wall to kill him. See, not really accurate, and most people really didn't care about the historical accuracy of that detail in that game. We enjoyed the game for what it was, even though the devs took creative decisions around that historical figure. A similar situation in Assassin's Creed 3 where Connor helps historical figures like George Washington and his allies to get the colonies together. Of course, not historically accurate, but we still enjoyed the grandiose made-up story. It's really the same here. Historically, Yasuke was sent back with the Jesuits after the fall of Oda Nobunaga, and the devs basically made what-if scenarios with him in the game here. I don't really see an issue with it, but that's just me. Some people are saying that since Ubisoft is a Western dev, they don't respect Japanese history. Just gonna bring out a game called Neo. I know it's a fantasy game with mythical monsters and powers, but the game was made by Japanese devs Team Ninja. And in that game, they had a boss called the Obsidian Samurai, who was considered a black samurai that worked under Oda Nobunaga. Again, a game not to be taken too seriously, but if Japanese devs themselves can make a game with Yasuke being a black samurai, I don't see a reason why Ubisoft, a Western dev, cannot. Just food for thought here. Of course, there are more issues surrounding the game, like Yasuke breaking a shrine or burning something, like a temple or something like that. I don't know if it's really true because I didn't really see that in the game myself. But if it is true, that's something people can be rightfully angry about. And also, he murders Japanese soldiers and men all over, blah blah blah. It also happens in Neo as well, where the boss, Obsidian Samurai, kills a bunch of Japanese people when Oda Nobunaga orders him to do so. So, I don't really see the issue with that for this game. Regardless, I didn't find any situation with Yasuke that seemed like it went too overboard in disrespecting anything Japanese related. In fact, story-wise, Yasuke is just there. You can even choose to play as Naoe most of the missions, so he doesn't really factor in unless you do his personal story quest, which really focuses on, his past and the Portuguese people. I basically went into this game with an open mind, as I love the Assassin's Creed series. Favorites being Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, and Black Flag. It kind of helped me enjoy the game and the story this way rather than me being skeptical from the get-go. With all the controversy out of the way, let's talk about the story without spoiling too much. It starts with Yasuke's introduction to Oda Nobunaga and being taken into his service, and also with an intro to how Naoe starts her vengeance story against a corrupted group called the Shinba Kufu. This is pretty much the major crux of the story. Naoe searching for the members of this mysterious evil organization, her meeting Yasuke, and how they form a duo to hunt these targets. The revelations and discoveries they make lead to a majority of the story's spoilers. So I feel it's best to leave it at that. I don't really want to spoil much. What I can say is how the story is structured. You play as Yasuke for about 20 minutes at the start of the game, and then switch over to Naoe's perspective for about 8 to 10 hours depending on how much you rush the main story. Then Yasuke joins Naoe and you're free to change between them for any mission or open world activity. This was my first issue with the story. Its big focus on Naoe at the beginning. You barely have time to get used to Yasuke or get to know him in the opening 20 minutes, and the story abruptly shifts to Naoe for a better part of 10 hours. After all that time playing as Naoe, I honestly forgot Yasuke was actually even part of the game, till he randomly pops out of nowhere and joins our team. We don't get to see his side of the story till you play through his missions featuring memories of his life after he came into Nobunaga's service. While these memories and story missions flesh out his character, it just felt a bit deflating to get them so late into the game. I feel like the game needed a much better balance in the story with Naoe and Yasuke, which is my major gripe with it. In fact, other than a few cutscenes and his personal story missions, you just play through the majority of the game as Naoe. His inclusion to the main story feels a tad forced, and he just feels like he's just there and doesn't really make an impact. I also played in canon mode, thinking the game will choose majority of the decisions for me and would allow a decent balance between playing as Naoe and Yasuke, but I was wrong. Only a few major story missions really got affected with canon mode. Rest of the time, I just went with Naoe for stealth and exploration and only used Yasuke for tough gauntlet-style combat missions. Not really sure that the canon mode made a difference in the story moments as well, and I don't really think it matters in my opinion. The story itself feels a bit too bloated, has underwhelming moments, and worst of all, it took me almost 30 hours for the story to delve into the Assassin's Creed Order and how it connects to the grander story of the AC universe. I won't say much, but we do get some Easter eggs and name drops of characters and tidbits from previous games. For me, the most deflating moments are with the Shimbakufu targets themselves. Most of them just end up dying without giving you any useful information. It just makes the journey through those missions and exploring, figuring out their identities worthless as not much info is gained. It's really only at the end with the final 2 targets the story really comes together and we get the most reveals. By then, you're just mentally exhausted from the story. Now, this is not the same with the side stories, companions you meet, and other open world quests as they are more focused, conveying specific stories. These I enjoyed a lot more as it fleshed out the characters a lot. Overall, I felt the main story felt a bit weak, with Yasuke's inclusion to the overall story questionable, and the side stories being a lot more interesting to partake in. Some of them had great stories and character moments as well. Now let's move on to the gameplay, and I'll start with the combat, which is a major focus in this game. You'll be fighting against a ton of enemies ranging from foot soldiers, bandits, samurai, ronin, shinobi, archers, teppo gunmen, guardians, etc. Both Naoe and Yasuke have multiple weapons they can use to dispatch these foes. Naoe has access to melee weapons like the katana, kusarigama, and tanto. Her ranged options include kunai and shuriken, while she also has tools like smoke bombs and bells to get her out of tricky situations. Yasuke, on the other hand, has long katana, naginata, and the kanabo as melee weapons. His ranged options include the teppo rifle and the bow. He doesn't get tools like Naoe, so he has to brute force his way out of tricky situations. Of course, both of them have tons of abilities for each of their weapons and special attacks and all that stuff, all that good stuff. It's very similar to Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where each weapon type had different special abilities, special attacks, etc., etc. So the weapons in these games also have special attacks for each weapon type. Now, Naoe is a shinobi and her playstyle very much embodies it. She's quick on her feet, does acrobatic flurry of attacks, and is able to weave around the battlefield with relative ease. With her tools and weapons, she can also quickly dispatch foes and disappear. She's like a glass cannon, does high DPS, but is quite squishy, and many enemies just 1 or 2 levels above her can easily 1 to 2 shot her, as she only gets access to light armors. The goal when playing her is to parry and deflect most moves, and dodge the unblockables, and wait for the right opportunity to pounce on enemies with her own flurry of attack. Yasuke, on the other hand, is a samurai and a giant at that. His brute strength is pretty much the only thing he needs, as enemies don't really pose much of a threat to him. All his weapons can easily armor break enemies as well as stun them really quickly. He's kind of broken in that sense that all he is good for is combat and pretty much gives us an unstoppable force to wreck enemies in our path. It's a power fantasy with him. He even has a running charge attack that can break through doors like the Kool-Aid Man. It's quite funny, really. He is slow in combat though to balance his monstrous strength and feels a bit clunky to move around with all the heavy armor he wears around. He can even parry unblockable attacks with special armor abilities. Once I got that parry unblockable attacks armor ability, nothing in the game stood a chance. Only way for Yasuke to really be taken down is with archers and gunmen, but he also has access to bows and guns, so you can retaliate in a similar manner to decimate foes. When it comes to movement, exploration, and parkour, Naoe is hands down the best person to use. As mentioned before, Yasuke is slow, egregiously slow. I can't even parkour medium-sized walls, whereas Naoe can not only easily scale walls and buildings by herself, but she has excellent parkour form, covers great distances with her jumps, and even has access to a grappling hook that allows her to scale and climb almost any building with ease. She can crouch, do dodge rolls, and even crawl on the ground. I mean, Yasuke can also crawl on the ground, but Naoe is much quicker when she does it. Plus, when it comes to stealth, Yasuke is easily spotted with his giant frame, whereas Naoe is tiny and can keep herself well hidden in many situations. Not only that, Yasuke doesn't even have silent assassinations. His assassination is called a brutal assassination and is quite possibly some of the loudest kill animations I've ever seen. It pretty much alerts the whole area, so it's best not to use him in stealth. Meanwhile, Naoe has access to the Hidden Blade, which allows her to dispatch her enemies in silence quickly, and with some upgrades she can even do double assassinations silently as well. She embodies the assassin nature in every way. Though some special enemies cannot be instantly assassinated if their health pool is too big, and some enemies can even stop Naoe from even attempting an assassination. This is new for me and forces players into melee combat immediately. So you really do have to be mindful of the enemies and use eagle vision and tagging to mark them to see if they can be assassinated or not. If it's red letters for the silent assassination, prompt, that means they can block that attempt, so be very careful. Before we go any further, comparisons will be made with Ghost of Tsushima and this game, as both games feature samurai and shinobi aspects. Jin in Ghost of Tsushima is a samurai and is also able to use stealth skills, can do silent assassinations, use a bow, tools, etc, etc. But in this game, Ubisoft has basically split the samurai and shinobi aspects into two distinct characters to tell their story of Yasuke and Naoe. Story-wise, it's fine, but I did also feel the gameplay was limiting. I wish we could use both samurai and shinobi skills at the same time. Due to this, I just ended up playing as Naoe for the majority of the game, as she was just quicker, easier to explore with, and embodied the theme of the series better. Yasuke was only ever used in tough combat situations, as that's all his purpose was. He can't parkour well and is limited in his options for exploration. Worst of all, he can't even do the leap of faith properly.
It is harder than it looks.
Yeah, he's no AC material at this point. Not only that, switching between the two isn't a simple button press, but you have to go into the menu. This also involves a loading screen, which just slows down the play. Though not a long loading screen, it still adds up, and eventually I just didn't bother with changing to Yasuke unless I absolutely needed to. Speaking of exploration, that's another major aspect of the game. The map of AC Shadows is huge. You can spend dozens of hours just exploring, unlocking viewpoints, marking down undiscovered locations on the map, and uncovering their secrets. There's a bunch of side activities, including meditation to unlock new Naoe memory quests, horse archery minigame, kata lessons, praying in temples and shrines to unlock knowledge points, etc. There's also forts and castles to conquer for epic and legendary loot, side quests to uncover, and a number of allies to recruit for your home base. Yeah, I forgot. You get to have your own home base, and depending on the materials you gather from the open world, you can build an improvised base to become even bigger. It also houses all your recruits and pets you come across on your journey. The recruits you gather factor into the investigation mechanic in the game. Unlike other AC games, you don't really get a waypoint marker when looking for targets. You have an objective board, and each person or target on the board has specific missions for them. You're given general clues of their whereabouts of the location you need to head to figure out the quest. You can eyeball it by looking at the map and trying to figure it out, or you can send scouts to find a more exact location of the quest marker. So, exploring and getting more recruits and scouts really does help you in the long run. Once you use a scout, they can't be used until they are recharged till a new season begins, or you can spend in game currency to recharge them manually in the hideouts. While the exploration and investigation does feel interesting at first, I somehow felt it got a bit tiring by the end. Honestly, some of the clues can be somewhat cryptic, and sometimes the clues can be off on the map by a long shot. To me, it felt like added bloat for the game, which really doesn't need it. I do recommend exploring the world and completing side quests as it helps to level up Naue and Yasuke. Yes, leveling up like RPG games is in this game similar to Valhalla. Higher levels give you access to higher level gear and weapons. These weapons and armor come in different rarities, with yellow or legendary being the best among them.
Hello there.
These legendary armors and weapons have unique abilities which far outshine the rest of the loot. For example, I got a legendary Tanto early in the game that allowed me to get a second vulnerable hit after doing a first one. This is a broken ability for Naue and allowed me to chain vulnerable hits on enemies non-stop. Similarly, Yasuke, as mentioned earlier, has a legendary armor early in the game that allows him to parry unblockable attacks, which I think is one of the most broken abilities in the game. Even if your gear is of lower level, you can level them up to your current level by unlocking the blacksmith at your home base. So you can use your favorite weapons throughout the game and even change their looks and customize it as you get newer gear. I really do like the customization and gear in the game. It's really fun to gather them all. I do have a gripe with the exploration when it comes to the sliding hills. In most AC games, your assassin protagonist is able to scale and climb most buildings, and after AC3, you were able to freely climb trees and stuff. But I feel that the parkour system has improved in many ways with new animations, streamlined controls, etc., but it also has gone backwards in some ways. Many times I had moments where I just wanted to reorient myself in combat only for Naue or Yasuke to climb a random wall or go up a ladder or something. As mentioned earlier, the sliding hills. The game has a ton of it, which gives you a quick getaway by sliding away from enemies, but it also hinders you from scaling hills freely. You just end up sliding back down and have to take the long route to get to a desired location. Thankfully, you can use Pathfinder mode to show a route to your marker and ride your horse quickly to these locations. And of course, you have tons of viewpoints and hideouts to fast travel to once unlocked. But still, I just felt like some of my open world freedom was taken away from me. It's similar to the tree climbing and parkour. When tree climbing was introduced in AC3, you were able to freely jump from one branch to another and climb most trees. Now it's not the case, as you need to look out for yellow wooden spots on the trees to climb onto. It's very restrictive. While the devs did succeed in making the open world bigger, they kind of neglected to bring some of the best climbing and parkour tech from the previous AC games. Both characters can swim in the water and can also dive underwater. You can unlock some secret areas as well as find some loot during these underwater moments. This is a nice inclusion as it changes the pace of a bit and also allows different access points when approaching an objective. Now, when it comes to some of the side activities, I did feel like the temples and shrines went overboard. Praying at one or two shrines or finding one or two scrolls is enough per location. But sometimes you gotta pray at shrines or locate up to 5 scrolls. It's just padding at that point, as the animation objectives are the same. A complete waste of time in my opinion. One last thing I wanted to mention is hunting. It's not possible to hunt in this game. I don't get this, as AC3 introduced hunting. It was a huge aspect in that game, fur trading, armor creation, etc. It was also a mini game on its own, so I was really looking forward to it, and sadly, I tried my best to hunt in this game and it's a no-go. I just couldn't hurt any animals. There's a bunch of animals too, like deer, boar, foxes, birds, etc. I just feel like it's a huge missed opportunity and an activity I enjoyed in previous AC titles, which really didn't make it to this one. In terms of performance, I played on the PS5 Pro, and for the most part, the game ran great in performance mode, 60 FPS. Had no real issues, had one glitch where the game wouldn't load from a death, but I was also playing for like 15 hours straight, so I'm guessing, memory just leaked out or something. So I just reset the game from the dashboard and it worked fine. Loading times are a few seconds at most, and I didn't see any game-breaking glitches, bugs, or even crashes. I did, however, notice some animation glitches during combat from time to time. Still, overall, it's pretty polished for the launch. The game's environmental visuals look great, especially when viewing the open world from the viewpoints. The scale is massive and the game loads the whole map seamlessly. You can pretty much horse ride from one end of the map to another in one go. Very rarely I had noticeable pop-in issues, and overall I was just impressed with the scenery, especially with the changing seasons. Animations for both Naue and Yasuke are a highlight, especially Naue, as many new assassination and parkour animations have been added for this game specifically. I do have a gripe with the character models. Not the main characters, but some of the forgettable NPCs. Many of them have the same models and they're just basically duplicated faces. It's super noticeable even if you have different clothing on and aesthetics. I just wish the devs could have done a better job in differentiating some of these NPCs. Ubisoft has ownership to Watch Dogs and Watch Dogs Legion, right? These games have numerous types of NPCs, numerous types of models and stuff. They could have ported some of that over here, it would have helped with that kind of tech. But regardless, when it comes to the audio design, I love the music in this game. Some classic AC tunes have had some remixes to suit the setting, and they are great. The game does feature full authentic Japanese voices for a natural feel. English voices do an adequate job, but I felt it was inconsistent. Yasuke's voice actor does a decent job of showcasing Yasuke as a gentle giant, but during emotional and angry moments, his rage just doesn't come through. On the other hand, Naue can showcase emotional dialogue well, but has flat deliveries when it comes to normal conversation. It's just a mixed bag overall. Maybe it's just me, but let's see what people think of the voice acting after launch. In terms of replayability, you can play the game over again, choosing to use Yasuke or Naue in different situations, but at most you get a couple lines of dialogue directly. Overall, outcome of most missions has one specific cutscene anyways, so I don't think it really matters. Still, I put in over 50 hours into the game doing side content as I went through the story. Even after all that, I have tons of side targets left on my objective board, a huge chunk of the map to explore, and many side missions to do. This can easily take another 20 to 40 hours depending on the pace I go with. It's a huge game. Again, not all of it is fun, as mentioned earlier, with repetitive side content that comes in huge chunks, but other than that, I did enjoy the majority of the combat and exploration. Gathering new loot, fighting new targets, and exploring all of what the map had to offer were my highlights of the game. Overall, among all the controversy surrounding the release of the game, AC Shadows is a polished and competent AC game, with a huge map to explore, tons of targets to hunt, but an average story. While Naue feels amazing to use in all aspects of gameplay, Yasuke is only useful in tense combat situations. The open world is massive, with great side missions, but the other side content becomes somewhat repetitive and adds padding to the already bloated story. It falls along the similar lines of Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla. But those games had a lot more variety in their side content, even if they were bloated as well. I just liked the Japanese setting a lot more, and the world was interesting to explore. Side missions definitely held it up for me, along with the combat. I did, however, enjoy this game a bit more than the other RPG-styled AC games like Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla. So if I had to give a score, I'd probably give this a 7 to an 8. Best would be an 8, but that would be my bias, as I really did enjoy using Naue and Yasuke in combat, as well as found the side missions and stories intriguing to go through. But I'd stick to a 7. Either way, if you enjoyed the RPG-style AC games mentioned above, you'll no doubt enjoy this one as well. And it has plenty of content to keep you occupied for a while. And that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed and found it helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below and I'll try answering them to the best of my ability. Thanks for watching and see you guys next time. Take care.